Little worries that Jin Kim might have discovered the sleeping potion. However, Jin Kyung gulps down the drink and tells Lu that he can't be easily fooled. He asks if the bards met the king in person to be able to talk badly about his reputation. Lua claims they risked their lives singing as bards and used the words of people near the king as lyrics. Jin King asks who they are, and Lua panickingly tells him that it is confidential. Jin Kim easily concludes that it was the noble's doing. Jinkian claims he was turned into trash because of the words of people he never met. He tells Lu to see the king first. Lewis claims that they always have a trustworthy source, and it is their senior bards. Jinkin laughs at his seniors who can only get orders and decide if someone is trustworthy or not. Luke gets mad. Just then, Benny falls, and Jenkin also sees Mena unconscious. Jin King looks at Lua, realizing something. He checks where his knife is and glares at Lua, seeing that Jin Kong is not affected. Lua follows the words of his seniors to kill the summoner. Flustered, Lua grabs a knife, and Jin Kyung tries to stop him. However, Mena gets stabbed, and Jenkin immediately disappears. Jenkin returns crashing into his room and sees a light fading away. He gets nervous about what he just did and sits in the corner trembling. He remembers his leader's words that this is for the sake of forging a new world and calms down as he realizes that this is the first step towards their goal. He then goes outside and lights a signal lamp. A group of people notices it and feels pity that they can't see the strong spirit. The alchemist explains that it would be possible to research mana from other worlds. Ignorant mercenaries just laugh, saying that they do the cleanup as always. Just then, a single raindrop falls, and the mute old man notices it. He thinks it was just nothing, and they continue chatting about the disaster 40 years ago. The old man remembers a woman asking him to sing a song with his beautiful voice. Meanwhile, Lua meets the alchemist and the mercenaries. They came to collect Mena and Benny. The alchemist goes out first with Mena's body. The mercenary asks how much Lu of God is in advance payment. He tells Lua to count again, and surprisingly stabs him with a sword. Lewis falls and screams, seeing his own blood. The mercenary asks Luo not to get mad because they also need to make things quiet. He also feels bad that Lu's troop tricked him. They give Lu 20 gold out of 200. He reassures Lua that they can talk again in the afterlife. Meanwhile, the alchemist can't believe that a small girl can summon an amazing spirit. Carelessly, he plans to dump Mena's body in the water. He stabs her to make sure she is dead for good. Jinkiang panics and looks for bandages. He goes out of his room, surprising his parents. His father asks what is wrong. Jinkyung comes back to his room and thinks it is now pointless. He can't go back unless Mena summons him. He grabs the Ada and goes out. His father stops him. Jinkian gets flustered in front of his parents. He remembers Mena's words about becoming mature by looking at his surroundings. Jinkyung stutters and finally tells them that he is soaring. He shouts his apologies and tells them that he needs to go somewhere. He turns his back on them and opens the door. He grits his teeth, and he is finally out of the house. His parents run to the balcony and see Jin Kim running somewhere. He doesn't know if it will still work or if he will get panic attacks. He arrives at a pharmacy and buys medicine. He bought what he needed and wonders what to do next. Just then, he noticed that he was in front of a lot of people. He gets dizzy and falls to his knees. He squeezes his chest and shouts to be summoned already. People check on him, but he tells them to leave him alone. People call him crazy, and they call the police. Later, the police arrive, but the bystanders claim that Jin Kim suddenly disappeared. Moments ago, she was suffocated and looked down again. Just then, he realized there was something that scared him most, if Mena was dying right now. He slams his head on the ground, and people are contacting the police. He brings out the addict and remembers that it is a link between him and Mena. He also remembers that magic needs things. He stands up and realizes that his life is already a mess, so who cares if it makes more things embarrassing? He starts chanting while people find it weird. Nevertheless, he continues, even if he is called an 8th grader syndrome by a nearby otaka recording him. Shouts to open the dimensional gate, making everyone laugh and feel embarrassed for him. However, Jinkyang smiles, and the edict shines brightly. A bright pillar of light appears in the neighborhood, and a dimensional gate appears before Jinkyang. He enters it, and a broken edict is left behind as he disappears on the streets. Jinkyang returns to the Bard's Hall and discovers Lua, who is severely wounded. Lua asks for forgiveness and asks to be saved. Lewis tells him that Manhwa was brought to the coast. Jinkyang stands and turns his back. Lewis cries as he asks for forgiveness. He shouts that he only did it for money. Jinkyang claims he doesn't like people doing anything for money and scolds Lua. Lua apologizes as he bleeds. Jinkyang is frustrated but remembers that Manhwa would help him regardless. He runs toward the coast. Lua can't believe he is healed, and Jinkyang came back without his summoner. The myths and legends from the Bard's songs never mention an amazing spirit like Jinkyang. Manhwa slowly gains consciousness as she tries to remember what happened. She discovers the mercenary is concerned about finishing their job. Seeing that Jinkyang is nowhere to be seen, he knows that they are in a dangerous situation. He tries to run away but discovers Manhwa's lifeless body beside him. He shouts, and he gets discovered. He runs away, and the mercenary chases Benny. The mercenary throws a knife, and the panicked Manhwa falls. Her body instinctively runs on 4. The mercenary shouts at him to run on 2 legs. Just then, he sees Jinkyang and seizes Jinkyang, and the mercenary panics at seeing him. He breaks out his sword, showing that it turns into a long mana blade, and Jinkyang tells Benny to get down. Jinkyang activates his shulkin knife and slashes the long mana sword, breaking it into pieces. Jinkyang knocks out the mercenary and realizes that Gore is not cool at all. Then he tells Jinkyang about Manhwa's location, and they go to the coast. They discover Manhwa, and Jinkyang uses his earth medicines on Manhwa. The alchemist is glad that he hid after sensing something. He can't believe that the spirit is back when the summoner is dead. He is anxious about what to do next and plans to blame the mercenary. He looks up and sees the mana from Jinkyang's world. He brings out something and lights up a signal light. A huge shell count approaches the alchemist's signal light. Meanwhile, Luao realizes that the current bard's songs are false. He wants to see the truth beyond the seas. Just then he sees a huge shulkin passing by and concludes that something is happening on the coast. Manhwa's wounds are gone, but she is still unconscious. Jinkyang shouts in frustration. Jinkyang thinks there must be a way in this fantasy world. He asks Benny what happens after a person's death. Benny claims that their soul wanders around first until a god finds it. Just then, the huge shulkin suddenly appears and lands nearby. The alchemist appears and claims he came back out of curiosity. Benny points him out as one of their attackers. Jinkyang tells him to take Manhwa away. Jinkyang asks why they are trying so hard to kill Manhwa. The alchemist gets mad at Jinkyang's glare and boring question. He explains that those who are sent to the north are always taken care of the Lord's alchemists, marts, and summoners abandoned together while the king is conspiring with the wizards. Jinkyang then concludes that they have to band together to trap the king and make sure that the expeditions always fail. The alchemist gets confused. Jinkyang claims that he has seen for himself that the king held them. He concludes that they are making the nation fall so they have a reason to kill the king, and that the next part songs are about the Lord saving the country from a useless king. The alchemist is surprised that Jinkyang has said nothing wrong. He brings out his shield weapon. Jinkyang declares that he is in a bad mood and activates his shulkin knife. The alchemist attacks, and Jinkyang tries to fight back. However, his shield deactivates, and he gets hit by the alchemist's attack. Meanwhile, Benny apologizes to the mute old man for intruding. The old man points upwards, and they see a bright surge of mana. The alchemist laughs as he claims that his research is successful. Jinkyang recalls losing his strength for a while, and the alchemist's attack hurts. He tries to attack again, but his shield deactivates. The alchemist attacks again, making Jinkyang fall. Luo, who was watching the whole time, knows that there must be a reason. He then discovers the floating shulkin and remembers that the enemy is an alchemist. He looks around and finds a backpack. Meanwhile, the alchemist ran out of mana and approached Jinkum with his mantle sword. The alchemist kicks Jinkum as he taunts him. He stabs Jin Kyung's hand, and he screams in pain. The alchemist then tells Jin Kim that he will chop him up and take him to his workshop. Just then, Lewis shouts from the top of the cliff. The alchemist is surprised to see Lu alive. Lua tells Jinkum that the glowing rocks around him are stealing his mana, and the shulkin above is storing mana from other worlds. The alchemist asks how Lua knew about it, and sees his journal in Lewis's hand. He tells him to put it down. Jin Kyung stands and asks how much the shulkin can store. He then activates his mana and claims that he is the only one using his world's mana. He asks the alchemist if he can handle his world's mana. Jin King activates his mana, and the shulkins continue to absorb it. The whole place rumbles as Jinkyum continues letting out mana. The rocks absorb too much and send a huge pool of mana upwards. The shulkin above receives it, and it explodes. Rubble falls from above, and Jenkins passes heavily. Lewis shouts and tells him that the alchemist was trying to create a new life form with the other world's mana. Jin Kyung looks up and sees something above. The monster moves violently, and Jin Kyung screams about how experiments always create something creepy. The monster falls and looks for his friend called Tovia. It's an apology that he can't do something for this world. Jin Kyung feels Tovia sounds familiar. Lewis knew no one called Tovia friend, and he left to read more of the alchemist's journal. Jinkum tries to talk to the creature but just roars and attacks Jinkum. Jin Kyung dodges and attacks, but the creature easily dodges. It sends Jinkum flying and follows up with more attacks. It continues attacking Jin Kim until it generates flames in its mouth. The creature then lets out a powerful fire breath. Jinkum brings out his shulkin knife, but the creature dodges it. Jin Kyung is annoyed at its agility. However, he realizes that the creature suddenly got stronger. He then thought of doing things for real instead of copying moves from an anime. He strengthens his body, and the creature leaps forward. He lets out a fire slash, but the creature dodges. Jin Kyung goes missing from the creature's side, and he appears on its side. It attacks again with the fire breath, but Jin Kim dodges. Jin Kim increases his speed and is able to damage the creature. The creature gets mad, and Jin Kyung tries to attack again. He slashes off the creature's limbs easily. The creature tries to breathe fire again, but Jin Kyung attacks with a fiery thrust. The creature explodes. Later, Jin Kyung and Lua catch up to Benny. He asks to bring out Maina. Maina gets laid on the ground as Lua apologizes. Jin Kim tells him to shut up because it is not over yet. Will Jin Kim be able to revive Maina? Comment below if you want the next part. See you in the next video.